Hey, my name is Storm Brewer. I'm a brand consultant and a UX UI designer from Seattle. And today we're going to be going into a brief creative challenge talking about a application. We have a limited creative brief with a few main goals to hit. We're going to talk about approaching a creative problem and moving from initial concept into brainstorm into production. So here's the design problem. Kids have access to the internet through all kinds of devices. In a perfect world, their parents would have control over what they're able to access. But we're not in a perfect world. Kids want to search for the next best toy, video games, sneakers, etc. But using traditional search tools, there's a big possibility the kid could stumble upon less than ideal content. Even with parental control features, this is a possibility. So, our goal here is to design a digital experience where a child, ages 5 to 16, will be able to search for items that they want, and the overarching goal being that parents are going to have peace of mind, a 99% certainty that their child will not be subjected to questionable content. Bearing in mind, kids can stumble upon questionable content in many different scenarios. If there's any external content being delivered in the digital experience, upsells, things like this, that is an opportunity for that questionable content to be served to the user. First of all, we're working with a user base between the ages of 5 and 16. 5-year-olds are going to need an easy search experience compared to a 16-year-old. We're going to do a little research on reading comprehension, but I know for a fact that there's going to be differences between the 5-year-old user and the 16-year-old user in terms of reading comprehension, affinity categories, etc. Next, we have concerned parents that need to be able to monitor and control their child's search experience. And we need to create a search experience that has a 99% certainty that we can deliver to the guardian of that child. That's going to be an interesting design solution that we find for that. But essentially, we're selling peace of mind, control, monitoring. We do not want to have any questionable content being served to the users. And there might even be an opportunity to encourage communication between the child and the guardian. For instance, fun little messages from a fun little mascot that's saying, if you are uncomfortable with something, talk to an adult that you trust. We're going to restrict content. We need to restrict access. We need to restrict access to the internet in general. This needs to be a somewhat closed loop of content for the user. Another aspect that we need to consider when approaching this design is that the 5-year-old user is going to have and require and desire a far different experience than that of the 16-year-old. So what is questionable content for a 5-year-old is not necessarily questionable content for a 16-year-old. But it's really going to be up to the guardian to decide what maturity level of content is going to be served to the user. Typically, the research phase is an extremely meticulous process where we identify each different user that could be interacting with the app and what their desires or problems that need to be solved are. In this case, we're going to zip through research and we're going to establish two main goals. A simple app for a child to browse toys, clothing, etc., and peace of mind for the concerned parent who does not want their child to have access to questionable content online. After looking at some websites with information about this, it's clear that restricting access to the internet and eliminating chat applications are the two main danger points for children online. If we can remove any access to chatting with strangers, we're going to be eliminating a lot of headaches. The idea of making a simple app will will essentially leverage one of the main principles in UX design, and that is that users are familiar with websites or apps they have already been interacting with. So creating an app that uses design patterns already established in the user's mind is going to be a boon towards creating a simple, easy-to-use experience. In this case, my concept is to use the same general formatting as a television movie streaming service, which a child will likely have already interacted with, for instance, Netflix. Using a large, simple-to-navigate layout like this will allow the user to easily find what they're looking for. One important consideration for this particular design is reading comprehension. We have a design brief that says our user base will be between the ages of 5 and 16 years old. So with a little bit of research, it looks like 5-year-olds are sounding out words, recognizing a few words by sight, and it looks like this particular page about which words the 5-year-olds are recognizing by sight is missing from this understood website, but that's okay. So we can assume that essentially 5-year-olds are illiterate or functionally illiterate, and we have to create an app where they can use the app without reading and hopefully learn to read. Maybe we can encourage that in the app. 6 to 7-year-olds are learning spelling, they're self-monitoring, so if they don't understand something, they'll reread it, maybe ask for help. Connecting the dots, and then we move on to 8 to 10-year-olds, maybe reading some short stories, exploring different genres. Okay, so an 8 to 10-year-old is effectively literate, we're hoping, and a middle schooler, high schooler student, we're going to hope that they are literate, although we cannot make any assumptions here. So the app must be usable by an illiterate person. Because we are doing this quite quickly, I'm going to leverage an established design language for the creation of this app. In this case, Google Material Design, which is very nice, clean design language that comes with an established set of typography and components for us to use. So to start with, when we are creating this digital experience, we need to create a system for a child who's not yet reading to interact with the content. Now, conceptually, I'm thinking that this application will have a sibling app for the guardian of the child that will allow the guardian to see what toys the child is enjoying the most. Maybe we'll use this smiley face system for voting. Essentially, we'll have a simple home page with categories of toys, big pictures, and I think we should add some category titles, and the child who can read will be able to interact with the information that's being given in type, and the child who has not yet learned to read will be encouraged to identify words with the photos, so that might help them to learn how to read. We'll also be creating a sibling app for the parent to see their child's favorite toys, and maybe the app has an expandable framework so that the guardian could monitor the favorite toys of multiple children. Maybe they could view the aggregated votes of everybody's children to see the hottest toys that everybody's children is favoriting on a global scale. The issue here being privacy. Can we anonymously harvest data of the users without anybody getting frustrated with that? Another important aspect of the application, at least on the parent side, is going to be setting the age and maybe more prudently the maturity rating of the toy or app or clothing. The age range could dictate, for instance, clothing choices, whereas we can look at, for instance, the ESRB's rating guide, which is more specifically for video games, but I think it's a good starting point for a rating system, as far as the maturity levels are concerned for the content being served to the user. The guardian in this case will have a dossier for the child that is using the app, and then they will be able to see their favorites. So, as we delve into each item, maybe we have a approved video with moderated content that does a review. Maybe we have some product images, some descriptions, all reviewed, all moderated, and then as the child votes on the item using the happy face, neutral face indicators, those indicators will show up on the list for that child. A quick note about hi-fi prototypes before we move forward. This is an example of a live website that I worked on for a previous client. This is for Altaver, a private airline service that was previously Guggenheim Aviation Partners, and they wanted to move their portfolio of private aircrafts into the United States. So they had a rebrand. I named the company Altaver. We worked together to choose brand colors, and we eventually came up with a website and brand package, which took quite some time. And this type of process requires a lot of finesse and special attention. It's not something that we can truly cover in this short video. This website, Acumatica, previous client of mine, I made this entire website, this entire user experience, including all of these custom illustrations, and this is the type of work that really expresses all of those branding decisions that you make that take a long time. Now, in the short time that we have, we'll be making a sort of mock hi-fi prototype just to maybe have something to bring to the table to a team of developers or to some stakeholders. And in this case, we'll choose a fun toy like this motorized Nerf blaster. Of course, you can choose whether or not your child will be able to be served a Nerf blaster, whether or not you feel comfortable with your child interacting with the Nerf blaster as a piece of content, which the Nerf blaster would have a rating associated with it, maybe E10 plus for 10-year-olds plus, or whatever you decide as the guardian owning that Guardian companion app for the child. So we've gone through the basic concepts of the app, the goals that we need to hit, and we've sketched out a couple of ideas to move forward with into hi-fi. This is generally the process that we want to go through when we approach a user experience or a user interface. We want to consider the needs, desires of the client, or the problems that they're facing that we need to find a solution for. And then, of course, working on a beautiful visual to deliver as a final product to the client.